Hello, Facebook fans and YouTube fans of DX Engineering. It's Friday afternoon, and it is time, almost time for the 10-meter contest. But before that, we have the weekend special. And you never know what's going to happen, but we have a very special guest today. It's George, AA7JV, is on with us. Hello, George.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
Good, good. George, tell us where you are.
I'm in the Bahamas, an island called San Salvador. It's at the outer edge of the Bahamas, about 150 miles from the Turks and Caicos.
So, George, you're on a boat right now, right?
I'm on a boat, 100% on a boat here.
Yeah, show us the boat. There you go. Wow. And George, so you've been operating contests and all sorts of things, but tell us about the boat.
The boat is a 158-foot power catamaran. It's a powerboat, obviously. It's a very long-range boat. It has a range of about 8,000 nautical miles. It's really intended to go out into the Pacific. In fact, it will head out into the Pacific in January. And I intend to take it to a couple of rare or semi-rare places and work the radio, of course, using ribs.
So let's talk about the ribs, which is the radio in a box. Let's talk about that.
It started with the Baker Island DXpedition. We had a very good team, and we had a very good chaperone from the Fish and Wildlife Service. And I had the chance to talk to her. And, they were not happy for us trampling all over their protected land. We put up many tents. I don't know how many tents we had, but we had 3 operating tents, and we had a social tent, and we had probably about 6 or 7 sleeping tents. And of course, we had a latrine, we had a shower, and we had people walking back and forth, and we had generators and fuel, all kinds. So it basically was a big camp. In fact, we called it Bakertown. And this fish and wildlife person whose life commitment is to protect this particular island was not thrilled. We managed to get a permit, but it was very hard to get. And I was thinking, now, how could we make it easier for them? How could we make it easier for them to say yes? The tendency by bureaucrats is to say no, unless you really make it super easy for them to say yes. And that's when the idea was born. I said, how could we eliminate the camping? And when you look at a DXpedition, about 50% of the effort goes into building tents, carrying all the gear ashore, water, food, chairs, tables, put it all together, wire everything up. A huge amount of time is wasted. And the idea here is very simple. Put the entire station into a box and put that box on the island, connect it to a microwave-based IP link, and operate from the boat. And that way you eliminate the need for camping. You eliminate the need to go back and forth to the island. And you substantially reduce the time to set up. Now, we've been experimenting with this for almost 3 years. They're using C6AGU to basically test and refine the ribs. We have access to a couple of islands in the Bahamas that are just perfect for these simulated DXpeditions. And we have been able to reduce our setup times, other than building antennas, to about 30 minutes.
Wow.
So we take the boxes out, we set up the microwave antennas, hook up the generator, 35 minutes, and the generator is running. The box is talking to the boat. And of course, we still would have to build the antenna, but the station itself gets set up very quickly. That's a big advantage. The other thing that I saw in Baker was that we spent a lot of energy and a lot of time moving people back and forth from the boat. Comforts on the island were quite minimal. People wanted to go back to the boat, maybe just to enjoy some air conditioning. And it was very hot there, like 110 or something. And also take a shower. Although we did have a shower on the island, people preferred to do it on the boat. And so we were going back and forth a lot. This concept eliminates that completely. Everybody stays on the boat except those people who have to go ashore to top up the generator and maybe do some maintenance on the antennas. But otherwise, it's really operating from the boat. Now, one thing has become quite obvious from us. Now, been playing with this for 2.5, 3 years. And that is when you're on the boat where you have air conditioning, you have comfort, you operate better. Really roughing it on the island is cool and it sounds like a great adventure. But when your goal is maximizing the number of QSOs, comfort helps and really makes a big difference. We've been using contests to test the concept because there's nothing like a contest to test the endurance of a station and the suitability of it to handle pileups. Right. And we found that we perform well in the contest, despite the fact that we are really a DXpedition, but it's like operating from home.
Yeah.
So that's really in a nutshell. Now, technologically, the RIB represents a few challenges. It has to be obviously a weather-tight box. It has to house the radio. It has to house remote controls that control the transceiver, the amplifier, power, monitor temperatures, etc. And it has to be cooled. But since it's a weather-tight box, you cannot cool it with air. So we developed this water cooling system that cools the interior of the box, as well as cooling the power amplifier. So the power amplifier is water cooled. Outside the RIB, there are these radiators, and we use water pumps to circulate the water between the amplifier, heatsink, and the outside radiator, or for the interior cooling, a large radiator inside the RIB and an outside radiator. And these allow us to control temperatures extremely well. We have no overheating problems. And of course, just as importantly, you don't have to worry about the noise of the amplifier or the generator. They're about half a mile away.
So George, let's get into your slides here, because you've taken some time to really go through the slides and explain what's going on here. So do you see the slides, George?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So and you're funded by the Northern California DX Foundation.
That's correct. So I think they really took a very brave step, and they gave us money to develop the RIBs, and we actually built 6 RIBs for the Northern California DX Foundation. And we've been testing these RIBs, and they work. Now, this slide really shows an example of the response you get from the various agencies that are charged with protecting islands and other protected land. They basically don't want you to be there. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to get permits. In case of the Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, you need to apply for what's called a special use permit. And they're getting harder and harder to get. We have had a number of discussions with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they like the idea of the RIBs. They like the idea that you're not going to trample all over the land. You're not going to build a latrine, and you're not going to make a mess. And it's really not the radio they're against. It is the camping. The camping is the one that bothers them. The concept, as I said earlier, is very simple. The RIB is a complete station. It's on the island. It is remotely controlled. We use flex radios, and the RIB has a homebrew amplifier. It's a water-cooled amplifier that conservatively puts out a kilowatt. We don't push it. The whole idea here is reliability instead of performance. The operators work from the boat, and there's no camping on the island, no tent, there's nothing. We set the ribs up on some small little stands, so they're kind of easier to work with. But otherwise, there is only the ribs, the antennas, and the generators. And the environmental impact this way is really absolutely minimal. We were able to show to the Fish and Wildlife Service on Baker Island, and I think from other DXpeditions, they had the same experience, that the antennas don't bother the birds. They're smart. They don't fly into them. They very quickly learn where they are, and they fly around them. We add some tape to the guys, but in reality, the birds very quickly learn where the antennas are, and they don't hit them. The footprint this way is, the ecological footprint is very small. And of course, fast setup. We don't waste time moving back and forth. Nobody has to move meals out onto the boat. The operators are out to the camp. The operators operate from the boat. For the link between the rib and the boat, we use a 900 megahertz IP bridge. Now, this is kind of an interesting point here. We found that 2.4 gigahertz has trouble over water, probably due to reflections and the height of the antennas, but generally we found the link not to be reliable because of dropouts, probably caused by reflections. 900 megahertz works. We had situations where the 900 megahertz link stayed up perfectly for as much as 3 weeks. So it's reliable. For generators, we generally use Honda generators, which we operate in the eco mode, which saves fuel. And that's another important point. DXpeditions spend a lot of money and a lot of effort fueling generators. And using efficient generators is quite critical, because that way you can reduce the fuel consumption, and you have to carry a lot less fuel. And to that end, the rib has, and later on I have a picture showing the interior of the rib, where I would like to show how we have a very unique powering arrangement where we can get 1,500 watts out with a small generator. This slide shows really that the logistics is simple. The big boxes, the rib, the small boxes carry all the hardware for the antennas, the external cooling fans, etc. The orange box, of course, is just a toolbox. This is now the rib set up, and you can see the cooling system on top of that Pelican case. The small fan that you see on the wood block is the cooling fan for the amplifier. The 4 fans cool the interior. And in the background, you see the stand for the antenna. And the generator is a little bit away. It's behind us, but I think I have another picture showing you. So this is the interior of the interior block diagram of the rib. A Flex 6700 radio, a Homebrew 1.5 kilowatt amplifier, and what I call a data acquisition and control system, which today is based around a Raspberry Pi, and it contains a Node-RED-based software that can be accessed using any browser. So through the browser, we access the Pi, and through the Pi, we control essentially everything. And I have a slide that shows that. The next slide shows the interior of the rib. On the right-hand side, you see power supplies. The right-hand-most side is the 12-volt power supply. The rib uses 240-volt AC, again, to be more efficient, meaning we need thinner cables. Then left of the first power supply is the second power supply, and that's a 50-volt power supply. Now, the interesting point here is it's a 20-amp, 50-volt, 20-amp power supply. But during transmit, in the CW mode, when we want a kilowatt output, we draw as much as 35 amps. And that 35 amp comes from those blue capacitors that are next to the amplifier. And those capacitors are ultra caps. So we have a large capacitor bank that has so much capacitance that, in fact, it can run the amplifier at 1 kilowatt for about 5 or 6 seconds. The idea here is that CW and SSB are not continuous modes. The duty cycle is probably not more than 30-35% during a de-expedition operation, including, of course, the listening period. But, of course, the Morse transmission is not 100%. It really probably has a 50% duty cycle. So the power supply really is used to provide only 50% of the power, and in the breaks between dots and dashes and during listening, it charges the capacitor bank. And the amplifier gets most of its power from the capacitor bank. And this results in the generator running much smoother. It results in being able to use a smaller generator. It results in us being able to use the generator in what's called the eco mode, which saves fuel. And at the same time, the output is a full 1,000 or 1,400 watts without the generator racing up and down. If you've ever been to a de-expedition, the noise you hear is the generators going brr, 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 as stations come and transmit. So we avoid that. The generator runs quite smoothly. The left of that, the blue capacitors, not very visible, that you can see the large fans that and the heat exchanger that cools the interior. And next to that is the homebrew amplifier. It's homebrew, but it's an LD MOS-based amplifier. We had good luck with them. It's actually based on a Russian design, water-cooled, using two LD MOS transistors, and it's been quite good. Left of the amplifier, the aluminum box with the NCDXF logo, is the control box. And below that is the Flex 6700 radio, which connects to a Maestro on the boat. Or instead of the Maestro, we can use Smart SDR. For CW, I prefer to use the Maestro, but for FT8, we use the Smart SDR. The radio, the control module has all the remote control functions and the remote monitoring. So we monitor internal temperature, amplifier temperature, CPU temperature, all kinds of other things, voltages, AC voltage, power consumption, etc. And we are able to turn on and off various antennas, receive antennas, change transmit antennas. So we have a lot of control. Left of the control box is just a very simple dumb switch. And then to the left of that, you can see the water cooling line and a little water pump with a small reservoir. That's with the metallic screw on the top. And that's pretty much it. On one end, you plug in the generator, 240 volts AC. On the other end, you plug in the amplifier, the antenna. This slide shows the actual data arrangement and in the block diagram of how we operate this RIP. And of course, in the middle is the 900 megahertz UHF link that provides a transparent IP connection. The next slide shows the control panel that you see on the screen. And as you can see, the left-hand side is the amplifier control panel. We monitor the forward power, the reflected power, the amplifier temperature, and then the LEDs that you see, the lights, current, SWR drive, they turn red if you have a problem. There's a lot of protection in the amplifier that makes sure that it doesn't catch fire because it's remote. There's nobody to keep an eye on it. Otherwise, it's very, the operation of the amplifier is conventional. It's like you can hardly tell that you're not sitting in front of an Alpha 97A or whatever it is. The screen to the right-hand side of the amplifier controls the antennas. Now, in our case, we use spider pole or fiberglass or carbon fiber-based poles to build quite elaborate antennas that operate from 10 to 160 meters. And the matching of these antennas to the coax is taken care of by the tuner. The tuner allows us to switch antennas. It allows us to add additional capacitance, inductance. It's quite a powerful tuner. Further to the right, you see the receive antenna controls. There's a remote preamplifier filter that's on the island with a receive antenna. And then the receive antenna that we use has 4 directions, and you can switch. In this particular case, east, west, north, south. Really, Europe, North America, or South America, or Africa. And of course, we use the receive antennas mostly on the low band. On the bottom of the screen, you can see the AC voltage that is coming from the generator, the internal temperature. And you can see this particular screenshot shows 29 degrees C. And that's what we normally get, even when the rib is out in the sun. And then on the left, just one more control where we can turn the transceiver on and off. This is a typical setup where on the boat we have vertical antennas, omnidirectional antennas. And then on the island, in this particular case, we used Yagis. But we're finding out that even with vertical antennas, we can get as much as 3.5 mile range between the boat and the antenna. And with the vertical antennas, of course, the boat is free to move around depending on weather or wind conditions or whatever it is. So we have moved away from the Yagis and moved towards verticals on the island as well as on the boat. This is an important step. This is on board the boat, checking out the ribs before deployment to the island. So we power up every rib. We make sure they all work. We make sure that the networking works. All the addressing is set up. The addressing is quite a chore. And you got to make sure it all works. And then this way, when we deploy the ribs and we start up the generator, it generally takes less than 10 minutes to get them connected to the boat. And that's again important because time is precious. On a traditional DXpedition, you may spend as much as a day and a half or maybe 2 to set up all the stations. And then on the way out, you spend a day to tearing everything down. Now, on a 12-day DXpedition, that's something like 30% of the time spent building and tearing things down. Considering the cost of DXpeditions today, that's an incredible waste of money and time. And this picture shows one of the operating positions for the rib. On the left, you see a Maestro, and in the middle, you see a laptop. On the right-hand side, it's running N1MM. On the left-hand side, it has the controls for the rib. And that's pretty much what you would have at home, except the actual radio is in the rib on the island. And you can see the island there in front of the boat. And that would be a typical distance we would be from the island. But as I said, we could be further away. And I think this is the last slide. And this shows me and Greg, W6ICT, and Hal at W8HC operating in the CQ Worldwide CW contest. We came number 5. It's not so much trying to win the contest, but the idea here was that if we can place in the top 10, then this thing is working. And, placing 5, I think we proved that the rib concept works. The operation is smooth. We did have a few outages due to various little technical issues, but I think out of the 48 hours, we were on the air probably 47. So we lost little time. And that's pretty much it. I feel that if it's suitable for a contest, the rib will be suitable for DXpeditions.
Yeah, this is phenomenal stuff, George. I mean, this is cutting edge technology, and I have to congratulate you for, pushing the envelope, big time.
Well, the difference here is that This is not technology looking for a problem. This is technology to solve a problem.
Yep. Yeah, no, this is very cool. George, I want to check the chat room just to make sure that if we have any questions. Dino Kales 0S asks, what is the weakest link in the system?
Ooh. Okay.
Would it be the radio link?
Surprisingly not. I give you a couple of examples of weak links. Today, when there's a laptop in the rib that was not visible, you couldn't see it. But in some cases, we put a laptop into the rib.
Mm-hmm.
And today's laptops come with an external Ethernet adapter that connects into the USB port. We had those things lock up. We had the Ethernet switch lock up. And frankly, we had a few issues with flex radios locking up. The links are quite solid, but every now and then you have a short dropout. It's maybe only 100 or 200 milliseconds, and that can cause the session between the radio and the Maestro to drop out. And recovering that session takes as much as 2 minutes.
Right. Well, it sounds like you have focused in on just a tremendous opportunity here to really solve a big problem with DXpeditions. And if we've worked you from C6AGU here recently, I mean, that's great. You're down in the Bahamas now, you're on the boat, and you're continuing to do great research. George, thanks so much for coming on today.
Just one more thing, Tim. Actually, I left one of the ribs back on the island we were at. It's about 200 miles from here. And I can remotely control it via satellite.
Of course you can. That's incredible. Well, George, we wish you continued success. Thank you so much for coming on today. And we will hear you on the air from whatever island, whatever boat. And what a beautiful boat you have. Oh,
yeah, thank you. Yep. Tim, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. I guarantee you'll hear me. I'll be in the Pacific, and I'll be turning on a few good ones.
All right, that sounds great. So thanks to George, and thanks to all of you for watching today. And 73, we'll see you next week here at DX Engineering.
Thank you. Bye-bye.